All right, I think we're going to get started. Good morning, everyone. Welcome. My name is John Donadio. I'm the Executive Director of the New Jersey Association of Counties, and I again want to welcome you to our final in a series of non-COVID related virtual workshops that are all important for county governments to kind of pay attention to. Today's workshop is on an overview of the opioid settlement, and this is a joint presentation between leadership from the New Jersey Division of Law and the Department of Human Services, and will provide a discussion on the $641 million opioid settlement funds paid to the state of New Jersey and local governments through 2038. It will also include recommendations on the treatment, prevention, and other strategies to combat the opioid epidemic. But before we get started, I would like to turn it over to our fearless leader, the Monmouth County Administrator and NJAC President, Terry O'Connor.
Good morning. Thank you, John. And I'm fearless this morning because it's the first time I think we're coming to you, not on COVID, and we're also talking to you about what we're going to do with money we're going to get, not money we have to pay, not how much did health benefits or pensions go up. Like, you're actually going to get money to do good in your community. So very, very excited about that. So without delay, I'm going to turn it over to the experts to get us to the important part of the meeting. Thank you all and have a great weekend.
Great, and thank you, Terry. I thought I was going to get through at least the early part of the morning without hearing about health benefits. So, but anyway,
it was in a good way. It was in a good way.
It wasn't a good way. That's how I took it. But it did make me twitch when I heard it. So, a couple of housekeeping items. This course has been approved for continuing education credits in CMFO and CCFO in office management and ancillary subjects. Sadly, not CLE credits, as Lara and I were lamenting before the course. But please see Lauren in our office, and she'll make sure to get you your credits accordingly. If you have any questions with respect to the opioid settlement monies, please either send them to me after the presentation, or there'll be an email address at the end of the PowerPoint presentation, which we're going to share and circulate with everyone. If you have questions on programs or treatment services, Assistant Commissioner Mielke is happy to answer those questions, but please put them in the Q&A and we'll get to them at the end of the presentation. So with that, I am very pleased to introduce our two guest speakers for today. The first is Lara Fogel. You're going to hear from her first. She is the Chief of Government and Healthcare Fraud Section in the Division of Law at the New Jersey Attorney General's Office. Before joining the Attorney General's Office, Ms. Fogel worked as an associate at Levin Lee in New York City in complex civil litigation and white-collar and securities enforcement defense. She also served as a career judicial clerk for the Honorable Burton Lifland of the United States Bankruptcy Court for the Southern District of New York. She was a graduate from Columbia University and received her Juris Doctorate from Georgetown University School of Law. And we are back, and she's back for more, I guess, an encore presentation from the Department of Human Services. And Valerie Mielke, as many of you know, is Assistant Commissioner for the New Jersey Division of Mental Health and Addiction Services. Valerie currently serves as the past president of the National Association of State Mental Health Program Directors and as a board member of the National Association of State Alcohol and Drug Abuse Directors. Ms. Mielke holds a bachelor's degree from Fairfield University and a master's of social work degree from Rutgers University. So it's great to have you both here. I appreciate you very much taking the time to be here today. And we'll turn it over first to you, Lara.
Hi, can you guys hear me? Okay, awesome. All right, well, we'd like to welcome you here to the overview of the opioid settlements. Before we get started, we just want to provide you with a disclaimer that my office would like me to make before I say anything. Just want to make sure that, there we go. Okay, we see our presentation. Okay, so if we could just turn to the disclaimer. There we go. So before I say anything of substance, I just have to say that all information presented in this webinar, it's for general information purposes, and anything I say may not be considered advice or a recommendation or an offer to perform services. And please, no one should act upon or refrain from acting upon any information that I provide in this webinar without seeking professional legal counsel from an attorney licensed in the relevant jurisdiction. Only your individual attorney can provide assurances that the information contained in this webinar and your interpretation of it is applicable or appropriate to your particular situation. And no representations are being made as to the completeness of the information contained in this webinar. No aspect of this webinar is intended to create an attorney-client relationship and or be construed as legal advice. Okay, with that mouthful behind us, I'd like to turn to the substance of this presentation. So as John said, the purpose of this presentation is twofold. I'm going to do the first half and Valerie is going to do the second half. I'm going to speak about, sort of provide an overview of the distributor and J&J opioid settlement agreements, the $26 billion settlement agreements nationwide, pursuant to which New Jersey will receive the maximum amount they're under of just over $641 million to be spent to abate this really terrible opioid epidemic. I'm also going to speak about the state subdivision agreement, which is an agreement that our office, the New Jersey Attorney General's office, negotiated with New Jersey subdivisions to determine allocation, distribution, and how the opioid settlement funds should be spent. The second half of the presentation, Valerie will take, and she is going to discuss approved uses, how you can spend these opioid settlement funds, and then recommendations on the treatment, prevention, and other really helpful strategies to combat the opioid epidemic. All right, so let's start with an overview. Last year, these two huge nationwide settlements were reached. They resolved all opioid litigation brought by states and subdivisions against the three largest pharmaceutical distributors, that's McKesson, Cardinal Health, and AmerisourceBergen, who I'm going to be referring to collectively as the distributors, as well as manufacturer Janssen Pharmaceuticals, Inc., and its parent company, Johnson & Johnson, who I will be referring to collectively as J&J. These agreements were the culmination of almost 3 years of intense negotiations between state attorneys general, subdivision council, which was the plaintiff's executive committee, otherwise known as the PEC, and then also counsel to the distributors and J&J. Now, interestingly, these were not class action opt-out settlements. Instead, these settlements required that this critical mass, which is a concept I'll speak about in 1 second, critical mass of both state and local governments would opt into the agreements or sign onto the agreements, which ultimately happened. And the idea behind these settlements was that the greater the level of participation, the more states and subdivisions signed onto these settlement agreements and provided releases to the distributors and to J&J for that piece, the more funds would ultimately be paid out to the states and the subdivisions in the form of, to abate the opioid epidemic in the form of bonus or incentive payments. So I'd like to just speak very briefly on implementation and how these two national settlement agreements were implemented. So first, there was a period of time for the states to sign on to both agreements, which New Jersey did. And then the distributors and J&J was in their sole discretion to decide whether there was this critical mass of sign-on by states such that they would allow the settlements to proceed. Because without a critical mass of sign-on, the settlements would not be effectuated, and then litigation against the companies would continue. Critical mass was never defined in the national opioid settlement agreements. It was just something that the distributors and J&J got to decide on their own, whether there was sufficient sign-on by the states or not. After that, which distributors and J&J both said, yep, enough states have signed on, then there was a period of time for the subdivisions to sign on to both agreements. And it was the same idea. The distributors and J&J, in their sole discretion, had to decide whether there was a critical mass of subdivision sign-on, such that the settlements would proceed. And they ultimately did both decide and determine that there was a critical mass subdivision sign-on and the settlements were allowed to proceed. Once that happened, each state that was participating in the settlements, like New Jersey, they had to file a final consent judgment and dismissal with prejudice, dismissing any and all claims against the distributors and J&J, which New Jersey did on March 30th, 2022 for the distributors and April 1st, 2022 for Janssen, both filed in Mercer Superior Court. Okay, you can see in the next slide that there was this press release. Acting Attorney General Bruck announces 100% participation by New Jersey counties and municipalities in historic $26 billion opioid settlement. So it was not an easy process to get sign-on by the subdivisions, but it was an important process because the greater the sign-on by the subdivisions, the more money would come to New Jersey and its subdivisions from the settlements. So our office worked with the New Jersey Association of Counties, the New Jersey State League of Municipalities, the governor's office, all to get word out to the 262 eligible subdivisions in New Jersey to sign on to both settlement agreements. Now, when I speak about the 262 eligible subdivisions, I'm speaking about those subdivisions that were either litigating subdivisions and or have a population of 10,000 or greater. Those are the subdivisions that were determined eligible for payment of the opioid settlement funds from the distributors and J&J. So as you can see in this slide, on February 2nd, 2022, former Acting Attorney General Bruck, he announced 100% participation by eligible New Jersey counties and municipalities in the settlement. And as a result, New Jersey and its counties and municipalities are now eligible to receive the maximum amount available to the state of New Jersey under the settlements. And that's that approximately $641 million number to fund life-saving addiction, prevention, treatment, and recovery programs in the future, which Valerie will discuss in a little bit. Okay, so let's speak some more numbers. As you can see from this slide, the distributors will pay a maximum global settlement amount of $21 billion over 18 years. So you've got that big $26 billion number. You've got $21 billion from the distributors, $5 billion from J&J, and those are nationwide numbers. Okay, and that global settlement amount of $21 billion for the distributors is broken into three different buckets. There's an abatement bucket. You see that $19 billion number. You've got an attorney fee bucket where you see the $1.67 billion number. And then you see a restitution bucket, that $282.7 million number. So, you know, one bucket is used for abatement, to abate the opioid epidemic. One is used to cover attorney's fees, and one is used to cover restitution. It's a bucket that's just meant for states who did not have pending litigation against distributors and or J&J at the time of the settlement. And though, you know, so for example, New Jersey did not have any pending litigation against the distributors, so is entitled to restitution. New Jersey is not entitled to restitution under the J&J agreement because we did have pending litigation against J&J. But this restitution amount is paid out in the first 3 years of the agreements. And these funds can be used for purposes other than opioid remediation, you know, such as like attorney's fees, investigation costs, litigation costs, and costs related to the operation and enforcement of the settlement. So each settling state has an allocation of the abatement amount, and that allocation was already agreed upon. And New Jersey's allocation is 2.755%. And so, and because New Jersey achieved 100% sign-on from its eligible subdivisions, the state of New Jersey will receive a total abatement amount of $511 million, you know, $511,188,209.44. And that abatement number is going to be split 50-50 between the state and its subdivisions, its eligible subdivisions, pursuant to the state subdivision agreement that I'm going to speak about in a little bit. And, you know, I spoke about restitution. New Jersey, only the state gets restitution, not the subdivision, will receive 4.374%. That's the allocation for restitution, only from the distributors, which equals approximately $12.37 million that will be paid out over years 1, 2, and 3 of the agreement. And then the J&J numbers, there's that $5 billion amount. J&J is going to pay a maximum of $5 billion over no more than 9 years and 10 payments, with up to $3.7 billion paid in the first 3 years. There is an acceleration clause under the J&J agreement. Like the distributors, the global settlement amount is broken up into those 3 buckets: an abatement amount, an attorney's fees amount, and a restitution amount. And then using New Jersey's 2.755% allocation, the amount due to New Jersey under the J&J agreement is $117,495,930.47. So I made a little chart for you guys, and I will send this PowerPoint to John Donadio after this, so you guys can take a look at this in more detail if you'd like. But the chart shows how much New Jersey will get from both settlements. So if you look from the distributors, there is a $511 million abatement plus the $12.37 million in restitution. You've got the $117 million plus from J&J. You have a total abatement amount of $628,684,139.91. That total abatement amount will be split 50-50 between the state and the subdivisions. And then there's the total amount of abatement plus restitution of your $641 million number that we're all familiar with. Okay, so now that we know that just over $641 million will be coming into the state for New Jersey, we want to understand how the monies will be allocated between the state and its subdivisions. And the national settlement agreements, the J&J, the distributor settlement agreements, they provide 3 different ways to deal with intrastate allocation. There's a default under the agreements, and that calls for 3 different buckets. There's 15% bucket that will go to the state, a 15% bucket that will go to the subdivisions, and then a 70% bucket that would go to an abatement fund to be used solely for future opioid remediation. There's also the states can employ an allocation statute or a statutory trust, or settling states can reach an agreement with their subdivisions regarding allocation, distribution, and use of funds allocated to that state and subdivisions in the form of a state subdivision agreement, which is what New Jersey ultimately did. Okay, so the title, the long title of the state subdivision agreement, what we're calling shorthand the state subdivision agreement, is the Memorandum of Agreement between the state of New Jersey and local governments on opioid litigation recoveries. And I will also send this to John Donadio afterwards in case you guys want to take a look at it, see it, just so you have it handy. So the purpose of this state subdivision agreement is basically to establish binding terms for how to distribute and spend funds from any opioid settlement agreement, like the distributors and J&J settlement agreements. The state subdivision agreement also accounts for bankruptcy plans. So for a bankruptcy plan, it's in the state's sole discretion to determine whether the state wants to apply the terms of the state subdivision agreement to the particular bankruptcy plan at issue. So for example, with the Mallinckrodt bankruptcy, the state of New Jersey determined in its sole discretion that the state subdivision agreement should be applicable to the Mallinckrodt bankruptcy. And so the Mallinckrodt bankruptcy opioid settlement funds will be distributed in accordance with the state subdivision agreement. And most relevant for our purposes, that means that the Mallinckrodt opioid settlement funds will be split 50-50 between the state and its subdivisions. Okay, and there we have it in the state subdivision agreement. It says all opioid funds shall be divided with 50% directly to the state, which is called the state share, and 50% directly to the participating local governments, which is the local government share. There's that 50-50 split that we've been speaking about. Okay, so now that we know that the opioid funds that are governed by the state subdivision agreement should be split 50-50 between the state and the subdivisions, we now want to figure out how to divvy out that 50% that goes to the subdivisions. How do we allocate amongst the... So you'll see in the slide, this is a picture, the first page of Exhibit G that pertains to the 262 eligible New Jersey subdivisions. And the state subdivision agreement says, look at Exhibit G to the settling, or to the distributor and J&J settlement agreements, or if there's an equivalent in another settlement agreement in the future. So Exhibit G shows the 262 eligible subdivisions in New Jersey, which are those that were either litigating subdivisions and or subdivisions with populations of 10,000 or more. Okay, and you'll see in the rightmost column that Exhibit G lays out what's called consolidated state allocation percentages, which is basically the percentage that each eligible subdivision is entitled to in terms of, they're entitled to that percentage of the opioid settlement funds going to the subdivisions. So these consolidated allocation percentages, they were developed by subdivision counsel, by the Plaintiffs Executive Committee, PEC, in the federal multi-district litigation for opioid cases that was before Judge Dan Polster in Ohio. The PEC is made up of counsel for subdivisions, and the states did not participate in determining the formula used for these subdivision allocation percentages. But generally, they reflect metrics measuring the impact of the opioid crisis on a particular community and the level of health-related funding by subdivisions. Okay, so what happens if there's a subdivision that it's one of the 262 that's eligible to get some payment of opioid settlement funds, but for whatever reason, that subdivision does not want to keep its funds? Like maybe the subdivision has decided that it's getting too little, that it doesn't want to be subjected to the reporting requirements, for example. That's an example of why a subdivision may not want to get its share of the opioid settlement funds. But for whatever reason, if a subdivision does not want to keep its share of the opioid settlement funds, then there's the concept called voluntary redistribution, which our state subdivision agreement addresses. And it's basically in the event that a municipality does not want to keep its opioid settlement funds from the distributor and or J&J payments, it can voluntarily redistribute those funds to the county in which it resides and let the county sort of, handle those funds. So to be able to do that, the subdivision would have to give a notice at least 60 calendar days prior to the payment date to the settlement fund administrator. In this case, it's Brown Greer, and the distributors and J&J. And it's a pretty seamless, easy process. But I did want you to know that that was a possibility for subdivisions. Okay, so Valerie's going to speak a lot about this, but I did want to speak about the opioid settlement funds and some requirements and restrictions associated with them. So of the funds that are going directly to the participating states and subdivisions, at least 85% of them under the distributor agreement and at least 86.5% of them under the Janssen agreement, they have to be used for abatement of the opioid epidemic over the term of the agreement, not in any given year. And with the overwhelming bulk of the proceeds, 70%, restricted to funding future abatement efforts by state and local governments. And helpful for everyone, the settlement does provide for a broad range of approved abatement uses by state and local governments, including a wide range of intervention, treatment, education, and recovery services, all of which Valerie will discuss. Another requirement for these opioid settlement funds is they can only be used to supplement and not supplant federal, state, county, or municipal funds that otherwise would have been used for approved uses under the agreements. And these opioid funds cannot be used for past expenditures. Okay, another requirement or restriction on these opioid funds is that pursuant to the state subdivision agreement, there is a 5% cap on administrative expenses. So no more than 5% of the state share and no more than 5% of the subdivision or local government share may be spent on administrative expenses. Okay, another component of these opioid settlement funds that is addressed in the state subdivision agreement is this supplemental contingency fee fund. It basically calls for 3.25% to be taken off the top of the subdivision share for the first 7 payments under the agreements to cover litigating subdivision council's fees. So, there is a national pot, there's a common benefit fund, there's a contingency fee fund that council can go to first, and they have to go to first to cover their fees. But in the event that there's a shortfall, they can apply to get their fees covered under our state subdivision agreement. And the supplemental contingency fee fund is being run and overseen by the retired Judge Kavanaugh. Notably, the establishment of a supplemental contingent fee fund will be negotiated on a case-by-case basis. It depends on what agreement is at issue. So this 3.25% supplemental contingency fee fund, that pertains only to the distributors and J&J. In the event that there are other national opioid litigation resolutions in the future, this supplemental contingency fee fund, or what a lot of states call a backstop fund, that will be negotiated on a case-by-case basis. Okay, so I want to just speak briefly about, this also is called for under the state subdivision agreement, the county advisory council. So for each region that includes a participating county, which is all of the eligible subdivisions, because all 21 New Jersey counties signed on to the settlement agreement. So each county is a region. That county's health department will serve as the lead agency responsible for distributing their local government share. And then that health department, which is acting as the lead agency, has to consult with an advisory council that is called the County Advisory Council. And the purpose of that County Advisory Council is to provide input and advice and recommendations on how to disperse these opioid settlement funds across approved purposes and properly under the national settlement agreements and the state subdivision agreement. So each respective advisory council has to consist of, but not limited to, you need a member that possesses expertise in substance use disorder treatment or prevention. You need a member that represents a provider of behavioral health or substance use disorder treatment in the community. You need a member with personal experience with substance use and addiction issues. You need the county prosecutor or their designee, and an individual authorized to appropriate funds on behalf of the governing body of the municipality or county, as the case may be, or their designee. So I did want you to be aware of this County Advisory Council requirement. Then, for all subdivisions that receive opioid settlement funds, there are a number of reporting and accountability requirements set forth in the state subdivision agreement and the national settlement agreements. One key one is that at least annually by September 1 of each year, each region, which is basically the county with all the subdivisions in it, has to provide to the state a report detailing for the preceding state fiscal year the following 4 things. 1, the amount of the local government share received by each participating local government within the region. 2, the allocation of any awards approved. You have to list the recipient, the amount awarded, the program to be funded, and disbursement terms. 3, the amounts dispersed on approved purposes. And 4, the amounts spent on administrative expenses. And that's to make sure that on a nationwide, so both on a New Jersey specific level, you know, a subdivision New Jersey, state New Jersey, and then on a nationwide level, we're all adhering to the requirements like that 85%, that 86.5%, the 5% cap on admin expenses. We have to make sure that on a nationwide level, we're all adhering to that. Okay, so just speaking practically, there have been 2 distributor payments, the state of New Jersey and its subdivisions to date. There was one made on July 15th of this year in the amount of $24,663,923.93. And then recently on October 31st, 2022, there was another, the second distributor payment in the amount of $27,896,349.33. I will note that there have been no Janssen payments to date, but the first 2 Janssen payments, which are supposed to total just under 26 million, and that number needs to be confirmed by Janssen and the settlement fund administrator Brown Greer, but you know, assuming that number, that just about $26 million number for the first 2 Janssen payments, they're expected this calendar year in 1 payment. So we are looking out for that. So I did want you to see sort of what the distributor payment 1 looked like in terms of line items. You can see that the total amount paid in payment 1 was $24,663,923.93. There's in the next line your additional restitution amount, which I told you goes just to the state and will be paid out in 3 payments over the first 3 payments under the agreement. That's your $2,826,366.06. And then of this total amount, you've got a total abatement amount. There's your $21.8 million number. That's the amount that is split 50-50 between the state and its subdivisions. So you can see that the New Jersey subdivisions are supposed to get 50% of the total abatement amount, which is $10.918 million. But then there's a supplemental contingency fee fund payment, which is 3.25% off the top of that local government share payment for the first 7 payments. And that's why the total payment to New Jersey subdivisions net of that supplemental contingency fee fund is the $10.044 million number. And then you have a total to New Jersey of the $13.745 million number, which includes abatement and restitution. So that was the first distributor payment. The second distributor payment is the same. You can please feel free to take a look at that, but that's your $27,896,349.33 payment, which was recently made on October 31st, 2022. I'm now going to turn it over to Valerie, who is going to explain how best to use the funds that we have already received and the many more millions of dollars that we have yet to receive down the pike as we receive monies from the distributors, from J&J, from Mallinckrodt, and from any other opioid settlement that comes down the pike. So thank you.
Thank you very much, Lara. And one of the things that I wanted to highlight, because a couple of slides ago, Lara made reference to the reporting requirements on an annualized basis. So there will be additional information that will come from the New Jersey Department of Human Services regarding those reporting requirements that are coming from the counties. Those reports will come to the Department of Human Services. and then will be processed accordingly in terms of posting and the like. So there'll be additional information coming regarding that. And one of the things so what I will be talking about are some of just providing some examples of things that we fund here at the Division of Mental Health and Addiction Services as a part of the Department of Human Services. And so it's really things for you to think about in terms of expanding existing opportunities for additional funding, depending on your county and your county's needs. But also what I think is most important to highlight here is that there are resources and funding that's out there already that support addiction treatment and services, both at the county level as well as on the state level. And so one of the most important things that as you are thinking about how to spend the resources is to understand what the resources are that exist in your counties first. There are county alcohol and drug addiction directors in each of the 21 counties. And so, so each of the subdivisions, the counties, the municipalities who are receiving resources, my strongest advice is that you reach out to your county alcohol and drug addiction director first, just to see how resources are being spent, to get an understanding of the plans that they have developed for the counties and where the gaps exist, so that you can be informed as you make decisions on how you will spend resources in your counties. And so on this slide here, we have, so again, Lara spoke to the different pots of resources that are available. I'm going to be speaking more specifically to the core abatement strategies, in terms of use of your dollars. And so here on this slide, you see reference to naloxone or other Federal and Drug Administration approved drugs to reverse opioid overdoses. This is a strategy that here in the division that we have pointed a lot of resources to, including making naloxone available to EMS, to local libraries who are interested, to treatment facilities, to recovery support facilities, to shelters, to where really for not-for-profit organizations who may be afforded the unfortunate circumstance where someone is experiencing an overdose to an opioid, where they have this drug, this medication available to reverse the effects of the overdose, whereby saving the individual's life and then providing them with the opportunity to get into services, whether they be treatment, harm reduction services, and the like, to embark on a road to recovery. Medication-assisted treatment. Again, at the division, we support medication-assisted treatment initiatives. Medication-assisted treatment is really a medication that is used to help to treat an opioid use disorder. And in this instance, we have opioid treatment programs that are available in 20 of our 21 counties. We have mobile vans that are providing medication to treat opioid use disorder in a number of communities across the state. Moving on down this bullet list, services for pregnant and postpartum women. That is important for women who are pregnant to receive treatment, for their obstetrician services, that the services and treatment that they're receiving from the obstetrician are coordinated with addiction treatment services, so that both the woman and her child can have a successful pregnancy and birth event. And certainly it's been proven that pregnant women who have an opioid use disorder, who are receiving medication and treatment for that disorder, that they have successful births, babies being born at a healthy birth weight and the like. And so again, we have a number of initiatives that coordinate, that provide such coordination, and the ability to expand that could be beneficial. Expanding treatment for neonatal abstinence syndrome. So for babies who are born, exposed to opioids, expanding opportunities for treatment for the baby as well as for the mom, so that she can really successfully support her loved one. And expansion of warm handoff programs and recovery services, that as individuals are engaged in treatment, or for individuals who have had an opioid overdose and have been brought to the emergency room and are interested in either harm reduction strategies to try to prevent future overdoses, or looking for a recovery-oriented program where they can be in an environment where they are with other individuals who are in recovery, and or warm handoff to treatment programs, again, are all opportunities for use of these funds. Next slide, please. Treatment for incarcerated population. So we are using both state and federal dollars to begin to engage individuals who are incarcerated, and so that upon release, they can get engaged, immediately engaged in treatment. This is a population who has a high incidence of overdose and experiencing overdose deaths because they have, because in some instances, particularly if they are not receiving treatment behind the walls, they have withdrawn from substances, and then upon release are looking to sometimes begin use again at the same levels that they had prior to incarceration. So the extent to which this population can be engaged in treatment services and or connected to harm reduction services, it's a strong way of saving lives. Prevention programs. So some examples of prevention programs are, we have programs targeted to older adults across the state who may be prescribed medications for pain. So these prevention programs target on identification for individuals where they might be able to strategies to address pain effectively without opioids, and or for those who need opioids, how to store them safely so that their friends, family, loved ones don't have access to them. Expanding syringe service programs. So this is a strong harm reduction strategy where individuals, not only are they receiving sterile syringes, but there's really a breadth and depth of services that individuals can receive at harm reduction programs. There are currently 7, but the Department of Health is working actively to expand them across the state. That you can use your resources for the evidence-based data collection and resource analysis, so that, and this is important, that in addition to data that's available from the Office of the Attorney General's office, through New Jersey Cares, through the Department of Health, through the Division of Mental Health and Addiction Services, that there may be other avenues that the counties may want to study to identify how to most effectively reach individuals who have an addiction, and or target prevention strategies as well. Next slide, please. So opioid remediation uses, approved uses. So one is in the area of treatment. One of the things that's important is, and Lara spoke to this about, not supplanting resources, but in addition, wanting to look at areas where there are gaps in services. One of the things you want to keep in mind here is that New Jersey is an expansion state as it relates to Medicaid. So many individuals who are now able to receive treatment that is reimbursed by Medicaid. So in terms of treatment, you want to look for populations for whom are either underinsured, who have insurance, but maybe aren't able to pay for treatment because of their deductibles or copays. Or you may want to look for opportunities to support treatment for individuals who don't have insurance. Support for individuals who are in recovery. And so this could be both for the individuals themselves who have an opioid use disorder, or it could be expanded to those individuals like their families or loved ones as well, who are looking to strategies on how they can best support their loved one who is in recovery from an opioid use disorder. Connecting individuals who need help. That, having, for example, individuals who are in recovery themselves to provide support and help to connect individuals who need treatment is a great use for these resources. We found that in many of the initiatives that we have, that integrating and utilizing individuals who have lived experience, who have received the requisite training on how they can best support and serve individuals who have an opioid use disorder, that they've been very effective in helping individuals to not only gain access to treatment, but also retain their sobriety in the community, and reconnect not only with their loved ones, but in some instances go back to school, get connected to treatment, get connected into housing, and really live their lives successfully in the community. To address the needs of the criminal justice involved individuals. So as I mentioned earlier, we have resources in each of the 21 counties across county jails across the state, where we are providing, getting individuals connected to treatment. But there may be some additional gaps that you may find within your counties and municipalities in terms of service to those individuals. And so these resources can be used as that in that regard as well. As well as addressing pregnant and parenting women and families, including their babies, and those who experience exposed to neonatal abstinence syndrome, as I spoke earlier. Next slide, please. Prevention of overprescribing and ensuring appropriate prescribing, dispensing of opioids. So here's a great opportunity where working with practitioners in your counties to help to prevent overprescribing, whether they be in your emergency departments, and providing them with strategies around how to effectively deal with pain for their patients, while not by avoiding prescribing opioids where opioids may not be necessary. Also opportunities at looking at other private practitioners as well. And practitioners who maybe traditionally prescribe opioids for pain, but providing some evidence-based strategies to enable them to effectively address that pain without the use of opioids. Prevention around the misuse of opioids. That studies have shown that many individuals who develop an addiction to opioids have received opioids from family members and friends at times to address pain. And so again, having some evidence-based, and it's important for the prevention activities to be evidence-based for them to be effective around the misuse of opioids. And, you know, there are resources available on the U.S. Substance Abuse Mental Health Services Administration around prevention and around effective prevention strategies. And I would encourage you that if this is an area where you wanted to use your resources to go and look at some of the evidence-based practices. And preventing overdose deaths and other harm reduction strategies, such as, you know, a couple of slides ago, we talked about naloxone and making naloxone available to reverse the effects of the overdose, and then to connect individuals to the services and supports that they would be that they're interested in. Next slide, please. So other approved uses. So as I mentioned, in terms of first responders, we through an opioid portal, we make free naloxone available to EMS workers, to law enforcement, really across the state. We provide them with some information as it relates to resources that are available that they can provide to individuals who have experience in overdose. Some of these resources can be used, again, to connect individuals for whom first responders have responded to an overdose, to be able to connect those individuals to services and supports that are within your counties. Providing planning and coordination activities and resources to leadership within your counties as well, so that they can better understand the disease of addiction. You know, looking at research information that's available both at the state level and in your county's level to in order to better coordinate services across your county and to identify where there may be gaps for services and opportunities for treatment and prevention and recovery supports. And resources can be used in training and research as well, as we talked about earlier. Next slide. And so certainly if you have questions, as Lara mentioned, you have the opioid settlement at NJAC.gov. Also, if you have questions for us at the Division of Mental Health and Addiction Services, whether it be resources that we have available in your counties and municipalities, you know, questions about, you know, some of the evidence-based practices, so that as you are investing your resources, you're investing them in a way that has been proven to be effective. Please reach out to the Division of Mental Health and Addiction Services at dmhas@dhs.nj.gov. Also want to, again, just to highlight that you have strong resources within your counties as well, and that I would recommend that you have a strong understanding of what's available in your county, so that you can best direct these resources to the gaps that are in your county. And one of the last things I did want to mention is, so Lara referenced how there are county opioid advisory councils that here in the state, for the state portion, for that 50% that comes to the state, to the administration, that there will be an opioid advisory council as well. And so there'll be additional information regarding the advisory council. That advisory council will take a look at the submissions that were submitted to the state portal. We received over 500 recommendations for how resources can be used for the state portion. And so the advisory council will have the opportunity to take a look at, once that information is called together, to make recommendations in terms of how the state will use its 50%. So thank you again very much for this opportunity. Really want to thank you, John, for inviting us here to speak before the New Jersey Association of Counties.
No, that's great. Thank you very much, Lara and Valerie. I appreciate it a great deal, and you know, you've been a tremendous resource for us in county governments across the state. We promise to share with you this PowerPoint presentation as soon as we get it. We'll make sure to circulate that. We'll make sure to put it on our website as well. And if you have any specific questions for the Division of Law, again, the both email addresses are on the PowerPoint presentation that were included at the end of this PowerPoint presentation. You can also send them to us, and we'll make sure to forward them to either Valerie or Lara, and then hopefully get back to you. There were a couple of questions in the box, but I think they were all directed towards. So we're gonna stand down on those for now, and you can again either we'll get a copy of these questions and then we'll submit them to Lara and Valerie to get back to you if that's okay. And then I see Ashley has a question: will there be a local finance notice or additional guidance concerning procurement of approved services using these funds? I don't know the answer to that, Ashley, but I will reach out to the Division of Law and Public Safety and we'll let you know for sure on that, because you're right, they would be the I think the department that would handle that and the division that would handle that. So I'll reach out after this to the Division of Local Government Services, and we'll get back to everyone with that. Other than that, I don't see any other. Hold on. I guess I can ask this question. I don't think it's a legal one. Can the funds accrue, or do they have to be spent annually? All right, we'll get back to you on that one too. We'll include that because some of these questions may actually have to go to the Division of Local Government Services. We thought it was important to, to have Lara and Valerie here to do an overview of where we stand now. But I also think that at some point the Division of Local Government Services will have to weigh in. So the questions aren't appropriate for the Attorney General's office or the Department of Human Services. We'll make sure to share with local government services, and then we'll get back to you.
Right, and so I do see a question about when is it expected that the State Opioid Advisory Council will be created, and so there have certainly been. I expect that within this month or December that we will have that the State Opioid Advisory Council members will be appointed, identified, and that that meetings will commence. So yeah, keep posted on that. That should happen fairly soon.
Okay, great. I think that's all the questions that we had. And again, thank you, Valerie and Lara. I thought this was terrific. I really appreciate it. We'll make sure to circulate the PowerPoint and anything else that you need from our association to share with our members. Please let me know. And again, thank you and have a great day. I hope you enjoy it. Looks like it's beautiful outside today.
Thank you very much. Thank you.